Hello, it's the Ether Diver Patch a Week 2023 challenge. This is week 5. We're into February now, and as I mentioned last week, we are going to dovetail my challenge with the RPM challenge, which is Record Production Month Challenge, where you create a record, write a record, and record a record, put out a record basically in the month of February, 28 days. I've done that 3 years running. This will be my 4th, although I didn't officially finish the first year. I did actually finish, so but my 3rd official entry in my 4th running. And this year I'm going to do an all modular, mostly improvised album, as I think I mentioned last week. And it's based off, our first one is going to be based off the patch that we've been working on for the last 4 weeks. As you can see now, we've graduated into full-blown spaghetti. There's no longer any color coding, really. I mean, the color coding that started with is still there, but it's just a big mess, and I apologize for that. But at a certain point, I just don't have enough of each kind and color to keep everything grouped, and and this just ends up looking like this. But I will go over the additions here, and we'll talk about where we're going to go from here, and then we'll do a little performance, just a little sneak peek. Okay. So what we added here, when we ended last week, we had a generatively sequenced square wave patch with monosynth patch that was going through some reverb and delay, some fancy reverb and delay. Okay, and that's where we left things, playing along, endlessly generating melodies. This week, I took that patch. Didn't really change anything about the patch. I think I might have tweaked one of the envelopes a little bit. But that's all I did. But I took that patch and I built some performance elements, some accompaniment really is what I added to, along with some performance elements to play it and turn it into a song. Okay, so the first thing we added was some rhythm, because you gotta have, well, you don't gotta, but a lot of times you want to have a beat. And so our primary beat is coming from the Templeggio here, which is the noise engineering. It's our Leggio platform. This one is the drum voice. It's kind of a baby BIA, is my understanding, like a cut down version of the BIA. And yeah, so it is triggered just by the clock. So you get a clock every time you get a clock pulse or 10 o'clock moves. You get a drum bit. That gives a nice steady beat. And then the output goes into the Terzi Ruina, and we have it going into which one? It's the bottom input, if I recall correctly, is what the drum is going through. Is that right? Yeah. See, gets to be a mess, but yes, that is right, the bottom one. And that one has a bunch of low-end crunch, as I recall, just going on there. And then it goes out to the mixer here, which we've incorporated a mixer because we got a bunch of different voices going now. And then the mixer goes to the reverb, and the reverb goes out. So that is one change we made, is we made the reverb an end to chain instead of just on the main voice. So it's on all the voices, including the drum voices. It's just not a terribly sophisticated way to do it, but we're making groovy, spacey, outer space improv drug music, really. So lots of reverb. It's gonna sound great. It's gonna be amazing. Modulation. So we have triggers modulating the pitch and the whack, and the decay is modulated by one of the outputs, one of the bottom outputs, a very active output of the triple sloth. Okay, so that gives a pretty wild variation to the decay and a pretty unpredictable one. But the other ones are semi-random. Those triggers are actually coming from the Morcom expander of the Benjamin, because the Benjamin is being clocked at the moment. Clock input, clock, by this, which is being clocked by That's right, our master clock here, the good old O control. Yeah. So O control is clocking the Benjalin. Benjalin uses the Rungler to derive. Usually it would be clocked by. Usually it would be clocked by this oscillator, but instead it's externally clocked. But otherwise the operation is the same. Obviously the external clock can't be part of the feedback loop. Well, it could be if I patched it, but I don't have it patched. But otherwise it's the same. But this lets it just keep a steady clock. And then the Rungler is just doing its Rungle thing and generating semi-random outputs, and those are deriving into gates with this Morcom expander. And then those gates I'm using as modulation, which, oh, if you didn't know you can use gates as modulation, you can use gates as modulation. Now you know. Particularly works well with drum sounds, since they're on or off anyway. And yeah, so that just gives some different ways. There's other things you could do. I could put it through an envelope, or to get more variation and things like that. But this sounded pretty good, so that's where I left that. Okay, and then our second drum voice is the Q pass. Now it is triggered much less frequently. It is triggered by another gate output of the Morcom, number 3 one there. That just lit up there, lit up again. And this I'm using the ping technique with filters. I don't know how familiar you are with this technique, but basically you turn the resonance way up. I think I actually have this turned to 100%. And then you tune the filter to whatever level you want, essentially literally tuning the filter at this point. It gives you kind of the pitch of your drum sound. You can do things like envelopes to pop it up real quick and things like that to give more realistic sounds. I'm not even doing any of that, and it still gives a pretty good drum sound. I'll play it in just a second here. But that is so the Benjalin Morcom expander is pinging this filter. We take the output, the left output of the low pass, and it goes into a Terci Ruina. And this will run that one through the middle input. It's this input right here. To give it a little grit, and then it goes into the mixer, into the reverb. Okay? Modulation-wise on this one, this is kind of fun. The filter's frequency is controlled by the ornament and crine, the Turing machine that we're using, and so it's the generative sequence. The same sequence that's playing voice 1 is playing the 2-pass filter drum, ping drum. It's changing the cutoff of the filter up or down, which gives it sort of what it means is I didn't actually tune the drum, didn't bother to tune it to our pitch here. I mean, I tuned it till it sounded good, so it might actually be in tune to some degree, but I certainly didn't use a tuner and try and actually match it or get a volt per octave response out of the thing. I just opened it all the way up, which might be volt per octave. I'm not actually sure. I'd have to look that up to check. Could very well be. But I've also moved it around to good effect. But anyway, point is, you get a nice related sort of in-pitch modulation. And the other modulation on there, I've just got more gates. Yay, modulation with gates. Just a couple more gates from the Morcom. This one, this gray one, and one of this purple one here. And those go to the mystery modulation inputs on this, which I found kind of add percussive elements to the thing. One of them at least does. Maybe they both do. They're weird. They're mystery inputs. That's the mystery. So it's hard to say exactly. But that is essentially what they do is you just add modulation to the sound, gates, semi-percussive. I don't know. They're mysteries. It's a mystery. Panharmonium. So the panharmonium takes a feed from just the same output. It could be different, but it's not. It's the same output of our mixer, VCA, as our main voice. So it's the same oscillator mix, but instead of going to the filter here, it goes into the panharmonium. Panharmonium things happen. We'll get back to that in a second. Then it goes into the top of the terzi runa, where it gets a little fuzz, basically. And then it goes into the filter, the carbon filter. WM Devices, RIP. They're going to be one of the legendary companies, I guarantee it. Yeah, it goes into their filter. Some filtery things happen to it. And then I take the low pass 24 dB and the low pass 12 dB as the left and right outputs or inputs into this FX Aid XL, which is running the lo-fi junkie effect. That's kind of an infamous effect. It pretty much is what it says. It makes things lo-fi and junky. It's like a distortion and modulation effect mixed into one. And I'm modulating the hell out of that. Each of the inputs on the FX Aid XL are being modulated by outputs from the Triple Sloth. So they're just all over the place. You never know what you're going to get. And it's fun. It keeps it surprising. And from there, that goes into the mixer, and then thus into the reverb, just with everything else. Okay, and that's it. That's the voice. So what does that sound like? Guess what we're going to hear right now. Actually, don't know what it sounds like right now. It's been cooking overnight. Who knows what's going on with it? That sounds more or less like it sounded last night. Alright, so as you can see here, I can do this. Things get weirder. You can also use the got one of the outputs of this, the touch output I should say, of this, go into the filter so I can open it up manually. I think it's actually pretty open right now, but by filter I should specify it's the carbon filter. The other filter is still controlled the way it always was, by the envelope and a little bit of sloth. Okay, panharmonium things, like I said. Okay, so what we have going on with panharmonium is it is taking pitch from the ornament and crime. It's taking it from the third output. It's taking it from the third output, that's right. Third output goes to the panharmonium. So it reads the spectrum, it creates its version of its input, which is our full voice mixed. It creates a snapshot of that, basically, and then applies the pitch information from that we're sending it from the ornament and crime, and yeah, it makes a cool sound. And then for modulation here, we're modulating the center frequency, so which gives a different emphasis as that center frequency moves around. And that, hey, surprise, I'm modulating it from the sloth. Love the sloth. As you can see, I'm using the heck out of the sloth. Got a lot of outputs from the sloth going, and one input. And yeah, okay, so that's it. And you know, with this, typically, I will play a lot of these knobs manually while I am, because of the way the modulation is set up on this, I haven't found it super useful to modulate a ton of things. It can be modulated well, but for what I am using it for in this case and what I frequently use it for, I don't need a lot of modulation. Like here, you know, I'm just modulating the frequency, and but then I'll reach up and I'll change, like I'll play, you know, the glide and the wet dry and the feedback and all that. Yeah, and go from there. So yep, that's it. That's that's our improvements on our patch. There's a write-up. It goes into more detail, I think. It's probably a little more coherent, fewer jump cuts. Okay, one more thing. I have a new album out. It uses a little bit of this. Well, not more than a little bit of this. A fair bit of this. But also this, and this, and that, those, this thing, that thing, this thing, those, some even those, that, these, that. Yeah, a lot of other stuff. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the description, or you can just go to etherdiver.bandcamp.com and download Psychedelic Ghost Stories. That's the name of the album. I hope you take a chance to check it out. I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you next week with more modular patching. It'll be a whole new patch next week. I'll try and put it together in a way that is streamlined and makes sense. Might actually do a fairly minimal, maybe some Benjamin self-patching, something like that. But we'll figure it out between now and next week, and I'll have something entirely new for you. So if you're tired of this dang patch, you're not going to have to see it again after today. So, all right, take care.